by way of Reuters, where Egyptian workers fleeing Libya have said that anti-Gaddafi militias have seized control of the town of Zuwara, which is 120 kilometers west of Tripoli. How significant is that?
It is very significant. Shows Gaddafi is losing more ground to the people. I don't call them militias, I call them revolutionaries, and they are the people of Libya who rebelled and asking for their rights from Gaddafi. Let me indicate something. As I'm talking to you now, there is hundreds of innocent civilians are killed in AlJazeera. There are fierce fighting now is going on in AlJazeera, as my source I've just spoken to. As I told you, Gaddafi is now confined to a small part in Tripoli.
Just give us some further insight into what those revolutionaries, as you call them, are up against. We've heard of these foreign mercenaries. We also know of his internal security forces and also possible help from tribes that are aligned to him. How would you quantify their strength?
Well, I would. The information I have, it is obviously the mercenaries and some of his troops loyal to him. About the tribes, I think they are now defecting from Gaddafi.
Even his tribe, Gaddafi?
Even his tribes. Yesterday, they announced, some of them, of course, that they're not agreeing what Gaddafi is doing, and I think they are siding with people now. So I wouldn't say that the tribes of Libyans, all of them at least, not with Gaddafi. I would say some of his tribes in the south and in Sirte is his stronghold still holding to.
So we're seeing the east, we're seeing the west. He's still in control of Tripoli, but we're seeing control from these anti-government protesters, pro-democracy protesters, militias, revolutionaries, whatever you want to call them. Yet he's still defiant. You heard his speech a couple of evenings ago. He says he's going to fight to the death. How ominous is that?
I think what we're seeing from Gaddafi is what we call it the dance of the slaughtered. It's just the guy's trying to buy time. That's all. It's a matter of time, a matter of days. This is what I predict. It's a matter of days, and Gaddafi is going down. I mean, I'm sure of that.
Okay.
So people are committed to bring him down.
Awad Al-Faitouri, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us for the moment. We will no doubt hear some more from you later on.
Thank you.
Now, oil prices are rising dramatically. The unrest in Libya is, of course, largely to blame. Around a quarter of Libya's oil facilities have been shut down. Output is down by at least 400,000 barrels of oil per day. Oil prices are continuing to rise in Thursday trading. In Singapore, future contracts for Brent have lifted to over $119 per barrel. It's seen prices for the benchmark Brent crude oil rise nearly 10% in the past 4 days. That is the highest it's been in over 2 years, since September 2008. Then, oil went up to nearly $150 a barrel. And one expert thinks it will go that high again. Steve Levine is the author of The Oil and the Glory and a contributing editor to Foreign Policy magazine.
There's a high probability that the whole volume will be shut down. Libya has declared force majeure, and in history, when any country has declared force majeure, in almost every case, all of the volume has been shut down. That would be a loss to the world market of about 1.1 million barrels a day. I think that this volatility, the price volatility, will go on for some time. The U.S. crude went over $100 a barrel for the first time since 2008. The Brent went over 110. The reason that oil prices are so volatile right now is not necessarily because traders are looking at Libya. It's because they're looking at Saudi Arabia. There is some uncertainty, there's some concern about one, whether unrest will spread into Saudi Arabia's eastern province, that's where most of its oil is, and second, whether Saudi Arabia can compensate for any volume of oil that is shut down in Libya.
Yemen's president has ordered security forces to protect protesters after a recent crackdown left at least 11 dead. Ali Abdullah Saleh has issued an order to prevent direct confrontation between pro- and anti-government demonstrators. Protests have been going on in Yemen for 2 weeks. On Wednesday, 2 pro-democracy protesters were killed. More than 1,000 Bahrainis have spent a 5th night camped out at the capital's Pearl roundabout as part of protests against the government and the royal family. Tents have been pitched and food stalls set up to provide free meals for protesters. Faced with mounting pressure, Bahrain's government this week released dozens of political prisoners. Rescue teams are hunting for those missing in the wake of a powerful earthquake in New Zealand. It's claimed 98 lives so far. It's likely that there'll be more earthquakes this year. Our meteorologist Steph Galter takes a closer look at the reasons for the earthquake.
New Zealand is no stranger to earthquakes. It lies on what's known as the Ring of Fire, and this is a zone surrounding the Pacific that sees a large number of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions every single year. Now, New Zealand is just to the west of this ring, and it lies directly on the fault line between the Pacific Plate and the Australian Plate. The problems here occur because the Pacific Plate is heading west, being swallowed up underneath the Australian Plate, and it's moving around 3 metres every 100 years, which, relatively speaking, is pretty fast. Now, there are fault lines on the North and the South Island, and the one on the South Island is even obvious on a satellite picture. You can see it here following the line of the Alps all the way up the South Island, splitting into 3 towards the north. Now, with these rifts lying across the country, it's not really surprising that we see so many earthquakes. The most powerful ever recorded was in 1855. A massive 8.2 magnitude quake struck just to the east of Wellington, and this actually shifted the ground upwards by over 6 metres. Now, this latest quake is just thought to be an aftershock of the huge 7.1 magnitude quake which struck the island in September 2010. Now, since then, there's been numerous tremors in the area. This one was the most devastating for several reasons. Not only was it a very strong quake, but it also was very close to Christchurch. It struck just 10 kilometres away, which is much closer than last year's, and it was shallower too. Another reason for the destruction was that it hit in the middle part of the day when the streets were full of people. September's tremor took place in the early hours of the morning. Now, there have already been several strong tremors since this last quake, and there will be plenty more in the coming months.
Well, we can get the latest on the situation in Christchurch from Tanya Page.
The death toll is expected to climb much higher, with police having grave concerns for up to 226 people. The coroner has said that they are having some difficulty identifying the people that they are pulling out of the rubble because of the level and severity of the injuries they've sustained. So they're encouraging people who have reported their loved ones and friends missing to give them a little information about what clothing they may have been wearing, tattoos, jewellery, birth